Welcome to this episode of MENable Matters with me, Steve Whitten. I've got another amazing guest with me today. Now, this is a lady that I've been connected with on LinkedIn for some time. We can't quite remember how long it is, but she is an amazing connection, and we always have inspirational chats, and I know that's probably going to be the case today as well. This lady is a stress management coach, and she's an absolute inspiration, and we are going to get on to a pretty tough subject because a few years ago, her son actually took his own life, and that has also shaped who she is and what she does and how she interacts with the rest of us now. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce to MENable Matters, Joy Langley. Joy, how are you?
Hi, Steve. What an introduction. How can I live up to that, Steve? My goodness me. I told you not to do that.
Well, I know that you will live up to it. That's why I did it. So go on, in great MENable Matters style, if you could tell us who you are, where you're from and what you do,
Yeah,
and
well, you
that'd
did
be
a
brilliant.
great job of that, Steve. So, hi, everyone. My name is Joy Langley, and I live in the UK. I live in Buckinghamshire, which is just outside of London. And I think you wanted to know how I got into doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I call myself a stress management therapist and coach. So my background is in counseling, and it's working with human beings and their problems. I kind of moved more into the sort of coaching field more recently because I've been doing some online courses, but I still have clients who see me straight up just for therapy and counseling. And I specialize in cognitive behavioral therapy. So the buzzword of the moment, I think, Steve.
CBT, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Everyone and his dog's having a go at that, but
yeah. But
but it
funnily
works,
enough,
doesn't it? It does work.
yeah, it does work. And funnily enough, I had someone come through to me for CBT, and he was asking about where the training center was for learning to ride a bike. And I was thinking, what's he on? What's he on? But CBT, if you put it into a search engine, comes up with training for motorbiking and
Oh, of
stuff.
course it does.
So
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
and I can't remember what it stands for now, but this is why this. And I had this lovely long chat with him. I said, "You're in the wrong place." I said, "But anyway," I said, "How you doing?" He goes, "Oh, how are you doing?" And then he left. So
Yeah. Did
that
you
was
manage
good.
to talk him out of it?
No, no, no. Do you know what? This CBT stuff, funnily enough, now that you mentioned that and I've mentioned bikes, it's something that my son did when he was 15, 16. He just wanted to learn to ride a bike. And I'm like, typical mum, I'm getting like, no, you
No
can't
way.
do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
No way. I don't want to
Yeah.
lose my son, like really dramatic, melodramatic. But yeah, so CBT came up then, but I didn't realize.
So how did you get into doing what you do then, Joy? Is that, how long
Yeah.
have you been doing that for?
I've been a therapist for, let's think now, trying to remember when I started training, probably since 2011-ish. That's when I did my training, and then I
Mm-hmm.
came out 4 years later, and I worked in a college as a college therapist for the students. So back then, that was how we got started. But I'm a bit of an old therapist. I mean, I got into it when I was 41, so you can imagine how old I am. I've now given you a bit of a clue. So I'm pretty old, and it's like, wow, to join that kind of a profession at that age, is it good or is it bad? And in a way, I think you need experience to be a therapist. I know I've got lots of young therapists out there probably be screaming at me, but I think like a good wine or a good cheese, we kind of mature with age and experience. And experience is an amazing thing to have when you're with someone.
Yeah. Do you know, that's really spot on. I was just having a conversation in another podcast with Sarah Sylvester, so I'll wait for you to see that. And she uses the phrase of be present rather than be prepared. And I think when you bring the two together, actually what your experience and, length of time on the planet and all the stuff you've been through and everything, what that gives you is that ability to actually be very prepared, even though, we don't mean prepared as in with loads of notes or a spreadsheet.
Yeah,
To actually be
yeah.
prepared in terms of your thinking.
That's right. And I think that whole thing about preparation and experience and competence and all that kind of stuff, if we go taking it into the world of work, they're just normal things. You're learning all the time. You're being presented with things you might not know. You have to, crib up on it. You have to be there and just deliver it. So I'm in a space where I still get nervous with every new client that I see. They don't always see it, And some clients I feel more nervous than others, which is just the weirdest. And some clients I'm just totally like relaxed. First time I've spoken to them or met them, and I feel like nothing. Others I'm like biting my nails, thinking, what's wrong with me? So I'm really just in that space, like you said. I try and understand that, well, there must be a reason around it, Joy. It's okay to be nervous, and perhaps they brought some energy to me without me realizing it, beforehand. And it's okay to be nervous.
Yeah, yeah,
It's the bigger thing. It's okay to be nervous.
yeah.
Even though you've done things a million times over, you think it doesn't matter. And this whole CBT thing, Steve, is really around, it's not what happens to you that's the problem, it's what you make it mean.
Right.
And it's taken me ages to actually understand, even though I'm obviously in the therapy game, but it's cognitive behavioral therapy. Something happens to me and to you, the same event. Let's imagine we were, I don't know, walking down the street and this lorry started coming at us. In the moment, me and you have to jump out of the way. So we do. Then we both jump up and dust ourselves down. And I'll say, Steve, why are you crying, Steve? Because I'm the strong one. Why are you crying, Steve? He says, well, you know what? I just bought this suit, Joy, and it cost me a fortune, and now it's ruined. And I'm thinking, he said, Joy, why are you laughing? I said, well, I wanted to practice my somersaults and I just learned to do that cartwheel, and it came in handy, Steve.
Yes, that is a lovely analogy. I think I know exactly what you mean. And, I would thank you as well for, almost sharing your vulnerabilities there and saying that you get nervous, even as a therapist, because probably people don't expect that. And my
Wow.
interpretation of that, of knowing you, is that that's because you care, Joy, actually.
Yeah,
And the reason that you're nervous is it's an anxiety, isn't it? That you want to do well for the client. So,
that's right. That's right. It's that performance anxiety that you get. So
mm,
even though I'm not an actress, I do feel a bit like teachers, you're putting you on the line. And I suppose as a salesperson as well, Steve, you really understand that too. You're always putting yourself on the line.
mm,
And when you're
mm,
doing that, there's nowhere to hide.
yeah.
So it's not like they can come to visit me and I can hide in the back room and say, don't worry, Steve will come out and keep you entertained for half an hour. Like,
Although I happily would.
me, of course you would, exactly. I've got to come out there and I've got to bring something to that interaction. So even though I sort of say, well, it's a bit like being an actress, and I say that in a very honest way, people can dispute it if they want, but I think you have to bring a presence to meeting people. And I think I love it when I get my energy going
Yeah,
and then I
yeah,
know it's there, and it's just like, then it will come out, boom. And
yeah,
I don't know sometimes how it comes out, Steve,
yeah.
as you know from
Well, I think my
conversations with me.
I think my acting friends would call that method acting, I think, which is where
Oh,
you actually
method
immerse
acting.
yourself in the part.
Oh, it
Darling,
sounds so wonderful. Oh, I love it.
hard
Method
work in this
actress.
environment.
Yes, I'm a method therapist. But in
Oh,
a
I like
way,
that.
well, but don't you think everyone's a method something or other?
Yeah.
Because we're making an assumption that everything that we do, Steve, we know.
Mm,
And it's the opposite, isn't it?
yeah,
Most things that we do are unknown.
yeah,
And
yeah,
even the things that we do, like I said, I see clients, speak to them, so I know how to do it. How comes it always feels like the first time?
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah,
I'm like, wow, how does that happen? So you have to bring that little bit of you that's happy about not knowing.
yeah.
So when we're looking at, therapy, perhaps stress management, it's living with uncertainty and living with change. So that's the latest thing I want to kind of focus on in a way, is to bring everyone to this place where, well, how do you cope with uncertainty and how do you cope with change? Because at the moment, the world is in a bit of a state, it's upside down. And yeah, we're dealing with a lot of changes.
Mm,
And then in the world of loss, and loss on different levels, Steve, as you know, not just people dying, it can be illness, it can be loss of your job, loss of your home, loss of a relationship. Sometimes I lose my keys, that's enough to make me feel that pang of loss, because I'm wondering I'm never going to find it. It's in that moment when you're a bit topsy-turvy, how do you bring yourself back to having your feet firmly planted on the floor?
mm.
Because that's where you need to be.
Well, I love that. I think that's really quite refreshing. And I think the whole worry that I have had in the past about sort of counselling and therapy is being told what I need to do or what I should do. And I think no, actually those are the two things, the last things you should say to anyone.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the difference between like a conversation with a friend where they're going to give their advice, and they can only give their advice from their experience. Okay, so as a therapist, I do give advice to people if they want it. Within reason, I'm helping them to come around to finding it. I know in the world of coaching, it's kind of like, and also therapy, you're not supposed to tell people any answers. But I find that's a little bit cruel. It's a bit like torturing someone. I know the answer, you don't. I'm sitting here watching you and I'm thinking, yeah, I will bring you to a space where you find that answer for yourself. But here's a little bit of a tip,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because I don't do that kind of lots of silent spaces therapy anymore. I find it hard. I found it hard when I was training. God knows how I did it. I found it very hard to practice it, like sitting on my hands, you know. And so now I want my conversations to be a bit more natural. They flow a bit, and I know what I'm doing, and the other person is very grateful that I know what I'm doing, and they let me be in charge.
Now, can I take you back to something you said a little while ago, which was about what you make things mean? Now, I could talk for England about that because that's been the crux of the issues that I've had. But what I want to actually talk about is the situation that you found yourself in a few years ago, which will resonate, I'm sure, with a lot of people, and going to talk about the subject of suicide,
Mm-hmm.
because that, according to the press, according to the stats, is increasing. The pandemic is causing more and more people to question and doubt themselves and their lives and their worth and so on. Now, for your son who took his own life, that was a very different situation. So, as much or as little as you are comfortable with, Joy, can you just share with us sort of, what happened there, and also get us to the point of what you made it mean, which I think was the
Yes,
key
yes,
transformation for
yes.
you, wasn't it?
Yeah. And like I said up front to you, Steve, I'm happy talking about that because life and death becomes something that you begin to understand a lot more. So my son, Riaz J, he died 2 years ago. And as Steve said, you know, he did, if you want to say commit suicide, I don't like to say commit suicide. I like to say that he reclaimed his own life because it was his life to have back. And you know, I've kind of brought him up as a young boy, a young man, to be very out there in the world and do your own thing. And so for me, my job as a mum was to get him to the age of 16, 17, 18, where he can just fly and do his own thing, solve his own problems. I don't have to rush down to the school gate and, you know, have an argument with his teacher, which he
Yeah.
hated. He hated. He goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, Mum, don't come down the school gates again." You know, but somebody had to protect him, you know, so
Yeah.
that was my
Yeah.
job. They get to the age where they can protect themselves. So you just let them be in the world. So, you know, he actually died when he was 23. So I personally think that's a good long life, you know, teenagers, youth, and he filled his life with a lot of stuff. So I don't have regrets about the way that he lived because he just lived life to the full. He got into trouble as well, and you know, I had to bail him out of certain things because he's so desperate to drive. He did the sort of thing about his driving thing, and I ended up in court because he was banned for a year. I'm like thinking, I've never been to a court before in my life, son. What are you doing to me? You know. And then he had this thing, his car, and then it ended up, you know, getting impounded. I had to go down to the police station. I said, I've never been to a police station in my life, son. So there's all this stuff that he's done. I'm thinking, I have, in all my life, I've not lived any of that. And here's he going,
Mm.
boom, boom, boom. But he's a fun person, outgoing, lots of friends. And yeah, he got bipolar, you know, mental health problem when he was about 21-ish, I think it was. And it was a bit out of the blue for me
Sorry, can I
personally.
just ask you, say he got that at that? I mean, had he always
Yes,
had it, or was that when he
yeah.
first got the diagnosis? Do you mean, or?
And that's interesting, Steve, because um, the thing with me is obviously I work with mental health and
Mm.
everything else. And bipolar is something that develops, I suppose. So I'm like you. I'm like, okay, has he always been like this? And then obviously me diving a little bit deeper into bipolar as well and working out what it means. It's not just having extreme highs and extreme lows. You know, people can be quite middling,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So when you actually read it, it's just the stereotype that's put out there. But I did witness some highs, and I definitely witnessed some lows towards the end. And yes, it was a development, I think, from changing his position at work. He was a car mechanic, so car technician, and he wanted to be up front and do all the sales stuff. So he moved into that. He's a very ambitious person, so he started drinking lots of the black coffee that was on in the actual showroom. And I didn't realize he wasn't living with me, living with his girlfriend. So drinking lots of coffee, working really hard, going home, not really winding down. And then I think in the middle of the night, taking the dog for a walk and things I couldn't see, to be quite honest. And if I'd been seeing that, I would have probably known that there was something a little bit weird happening. And eventually came round to me like late evening, about 11 o'clock with his girlfriend. He was crying and I thought, what's wrong? You know, what's wrong? I just thought, God, you know, and he said, oh, Mum, I don't like the job that I'm doing. I want to go back to what I was doing before and they won't let me go back and do my, I'm thinking, okay, don't worry, you know, it's just, tell me more. And it was 11 o'clock and managed to calm him down. And I thought, okay, he's off again. He's fine, you know. And into every life, a little bit of rain must pour. So I've got no problem with him having a problem. It's about learning and growing up and solving it.
So he was
But
working in a reasonably big car dealership at the time.
oh yes,
Yeah.
he was. Yeah, he was. And he'd done his car technician stuff. He'd passed his exams and
Mm.
everything else, which was brilliant. And then he just wanted to go into sales because he's saying he's getting a bit bored with what he was doing. I thought, great. I thought this is a great opportunity for you to start moving up in the world, doing, you know, you could become a sales manager or have your own dealership, whatever it is you want to do. You know, it's just there. Because I'm ambitious, he's ambitious, you know. I'm not that pushy mum, but
Mhm.
he was quite pushy. He was quite good at finding his things to do. So, but I think that pit with the change of job and then also drinking excessively black coffee. Now, I don't know a lot about black coffee because I'm not a coffee drinker, but you can get an overdose apparently, or you can do something strange with caffeine, you know, and I didn't even know that myself. I had to find out about caffeine. I thought, wow, you can get that kind of a problem with caffeine. We know it's a stimulant. So he was drinking it to keep him awake and keep him alert. But also then it might have been spilling over into other things. And he had some personal problems in the background, not with his girlfriend, but with a friend, one of his best friends. So it was kind of that spilled over into it and it ended up with a bit of a wrangle with him and his friend over a holiday. And so I'm just looking at what, if I were being, you know, impartial and standing back, I would want to ask that person why now. And why now I would look at a severe change or a change. It seemed like a positive change, but the things that you were doing to try and manage your own anxiety or your own ability to what you were learning, just manage that. And then the fact then it spilled over into affecting your sleep patterns. So you're sleeping badly, and then you're rolling back into the same situation again the next day. So huge talk around burnout, I suppose, in the world of where people just work basically in therapy, burnout, but definitions are various. But he wasn't experiencing burnout. I think he was experiencing something that kind of sped up, super speeded up something.
Yeah, yeah.
Some kind of, you know, like two meteorites colliding at the wrong time, boom, and then whatever that fallout from that explosion, he was part of that, and that affected him. So I'm just as like curious about why did that happen to him, but I had to
And
be in
what
a place of
support
just
was he getting in
accepting it.
his workplace? What was happening
They were
there?
really very good. They were
Right.
actually really, really good. Very understanding, gave him the time off, all that kind of stuff. Took him back as well when he, you know, was 3 or 4 months on, when he'd been at home for a bit. They took him back on again. He just started working again, but he was never the same person. For me, he was always a little bit absent. And that was the sadness for me as a mum, having to watch that. But he kept going. And then he got really back on his feet. And I remember him saying to me one day, he said, Mum, I actually feel happy. And I thought, whee, cheer, you know, claps, get the balloons out, you know. So that was another turning point. But there've just been ups and downs. But the real thing is that I suppose whether you're receiving a diagnosis of any sort, or you're perhaps caring for someone who's got a diagnosis, you have to just learn about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't get too wrapped up in it, find out about it. And with mental health stuff, you know, try and get the right support around that person, but possibly also you if you're supporting that person. And I really did just tap straight into the mental health system that we have locally, and they were fabulous. I just made sure as a mum that I was I am the mum down the playground. I was there with him every single meeting, Steve.
Bless you.
I
So
am that
what, I
pushy
mean,
mum, aren't I? Oh my God, I
well,
didn't
it's what you're going
realise.
to do. Exactly. As you said, you're there to protect and nurture and
Yeah,
stuff, aren't you? So,
yeah,
I mean, take us, take us forward then to the point at which he, took his own life. I mean, did you
yes,
see
yeah.
anything, specifically in the lead up to that? I mean,
I think I saw like dips
mm,
because he fell into a depression. So he'd been in that sort of, you know, with that bipolar, sort of semi-bipolar diagnosis. Because when you're young, they don't really want to give you a diagnosis of bipolar.
mm,
They'll call it a psychotic episode, so they call it a psychosis, and they want it to run for a certain period of time, you know, before they can say, yes, that's what it is. And I think that's a pretty sensible thing to do. So it's a psychosis. There's some kind of and it's a funny word, but you know, really it's a break in the way that you see things, and it can lead to you being, I suppose, depressed or high. My son did feel quite, you know, powered up and quite full and quite, you know, energetic, and he wanted to like start a business and he wanted to do this and he wanted to do that, but his attention span was like a fly, you
mm,
know. So it was like, and also his temper. For the one thing that really struck me, which I was so shocked about, was that he had a temper. I've never seen that in him before. So the short-temperedness, like, I want this, mum, I'll give you 3 chances to answer it. I'm like, I just have to say what you want. Otherwise it'd be,
mm.
that's it. So it was very, very quick. I've never seen that in him. That was a real shock for me. But like I said, everyone will have their own symptoms. And if you're looking after someone, you'll recognize them.
Do
But
you
for me, yeah.
do you genuinely think that he had bipolar? I mean, I think we are very
Yeah.
quick to put a label on things, aren't we?
Yeah.
As almost a sort of an excuse for, how someone is or what they're doing. Do you
Yes.
actually think
Yes.
that was the case?
I I've thought about it a lot because labels are useful, and I would
Mm,
have wanted him to have a label so I could understand it. But also, labels are dangerous
mm,
in that they stick. I'm also very worried about it following you through your life, through your way through work, which obviously doesn't happen any as much. You know, work is opening up. People understand it. They're not being so you know, like judging you badly, should we say.
mm, mm,
But yes, I think it's true. There definitely was a change in the way that he was. Um, I didn't want it to go to a route where he had a proper label at the end. I wanted
mm-hmm.
to be a psychotic episode that he just had for that moment because of the timing, because of the events, and then he gets back into his life again. Boom. Afterwards, that's the hope that I held for him. Didn't quite go that way, so I had to at some point begin to accept that, you know, this is the way it's going to go. Joy, how can you help him? How can you help him understand it? How can you help him deal with it? You know, so I had to become a little bit more like, this is just the way it is, and be accepting. And we're talking about, you know, we were talking off camera beforehand about grief and mourning and loss and change. And there was a part of me that had to accept that I was grieving over the son that I had before. So I was finding it very hard to accept him as he was.
Right. So this is even before he took his own life, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
get that. I
So,
get that.
there's all these there's this lovely word, just transitions, you know, moving from there to
Mm,
there to there to there. And I think transitions in life probably are a good way of getting through stuff. You
mm-hmm,
don't really want things to happen in a very gigantic, big way. It'd be nice if things happened in stages.
mm-hmm.
So it's life transitions. And it was a transition from me acknowledging that, okay, you know, this is what he's got. You have to step up and be a bit more in that space too, and and help him to move on to like, this is going to be a longer term thing. How can we cope with it and manage it? Because I didn't want to accept that it was a long term thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so.
Now, I know you as the kind of, real specialist in this area of it's what you make things mean. Now, did you say 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years
Yes,
ago?
two years ago,
So you were already
2018.
in the
So,
middle of being a therapist then. You
oh
were,
yes, I've
right.
been doing that for the longest amount of
Yeah,
time
yeah,
by
yeah,
then.
yeah.
You know, I took some more training around 2012
Mm.
to get my therapy skills on a different level. So the cognitive behavioral therapy is something which I just warmed to as an idea, as a strategy, as a process. You know, that really, what else could life be apart from what we make it mean? And it makes you question then, is it possible to be in a bad situation but to see the bright side of it?
Yeah.
You know, it's possible. It's
So
what you
what
make
do you
it
think
mean. Or
what was Riaz? It was Riaz, wasn't it? You said his
yeah,
name. What
that's
what
right.
was
Yes,
what was he making things mean then? Do you think that drove
he
him to do what
yeah,
he did?
yeah. I personally watched him just trying to get back into work and into the world of being around people again, and then it developed into a bit of an anxiety and then a deep depression. So I think he wanted to just have his life back,
Hmm.
and he wanted to go back to the way things were. And I think there must have been a point where perhaps he felt that just wouldn't happen. But he never voiced that to me, even though I would try to talk to him about it. He didn't really. He'd just say, "Mum, I don't know. I don't know." You know, like, and that was quite sad. He really didn't know. You know, just knew you were sad and you couldn't. And I, you know, in retrospect, I like to sort of say he couldn't find his way back home, Steve. You
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
and I think we can all identify with that on
Mm.
on different levels in our lives. You know, it's about being lost and it's about not being able to find your way back to something. And if I put myself in his shoes, I think I suffer just thinking about it.
Yeah.
I don't even
Yeah.
have to be there. I can suffer in my head. So when something's really happening to you, I can imagine that he was in a really bad place. But I also thought he was improving, which was
Now that's
just,
interesting because I was
yeah,
just going to ask
yeah.
you, and I'm trying to think of how to do this sensitively, but I've heard it said that some people feel that um, when a person gets to the point where they take their own life, that they are actually on the sort of way out of a dip, so it's almost a kind of they're in control. They pick their moment, they've chosen. Would you go along with
Mm.
that, do you think?
I mean, I've read similar to Steve. I must admit that I've been very fortunate in never having had a client who has taken their own life whilst working with me, which is, I'm just probably lucky because it does happen with therapy.
Mm.
But my son's happiness, I think, might have been a turning point where he, for want of a word, had been given antidepressants, and the psychiatrist was very good. She said, we can't give him too much, blah, 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 because he was getting to the point where he was talking about it to his care manager, and she shared it with me, and we all went in and had another talk. So a little bit of antidepressants, but it's controversial. Whether that was enough energy, as you said, to make him feel able now to do something. So my jury's out on that one.
Right.
Steve, it really is. But I just
Mm.
know that it felt as though he was in a much better, happier space. We'd been out that weekend. It was middle of summer, been out that weekend to the pub because he said he was feeling a bit anxious. I said, let's go to the pub then, and be around some people because he wanted to be out and just be around people. And I gave him a therapist as well, or at least I got him a therapist. So he started
Mm.
working with a
Mm.
therapist, which was lovely. But that was only later on. He agreed to work with a therapist. Before, the space before, he wasn't really interested. So I thought he was on the up, and it was kind of a surprise because the one moment, which again sounds very familiar, but the one moment when I left him by himself, I suppose, he was going off and doing some stuff in the week, learning about woodwork, which was great. And I thought, I can go off and see my dad all day. He'll be fine.
Mm.
Got
Mm.
to let him just be now and just be in his own space. And that was the day that he chose while I was away from the house. So it was like, oh. And
Right.
in life, not just with my son's situation, there's a lot of if onlys.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, I
yeah.
could write a
I get
book on if onlys, and my family could write a book on if onlys, because we've all
that. Mm.
got our different perspective on what we should have done,
What ifs
what
and
we
if only.
ought to have
Yeah.
done, what we could have done. You know, it's like I said, the person disappearing and leaving this earth, you know, depending on what you believe, I strongly believe that they're okay.
Mm,
I
mm,
know that my son is all right, and I felt that sense of a mother just knowing that their child was okay.
mm.
He's safe now, which is a strange feeling, but it's the one that I had. He's safe now.
Yeah.
That's great, you know, and that never left me. And I also, you know, started having very strange experiences, I suppose. I don't know if I was unwell, but anyway, I felt that he had become part of me again.
Mm,
So he
mm.
came from me and he went back to me. And that was a weird kind of
Oh, I love
thought.
that. That's
But
yeah. I mean, that's part of what that whole thing of what you make it mean, isn't it? In a way, you know,
probably,
if you don't mind me
yes.
saying as an observer.
Yes. No, no,
So,
please, Steve,
so
please.
he did it in the house.
That's correct. Yeah.
So
Yep.
so I guess you were the one who found him,
My partner found him, which
right?
was really like a bit horrific for him,
Mm,
you know, and he did get over it eventually, but it was a bit obviously of a
mm,
shock.
mm,
In a way, perhaps my son knew that he's a stepdad, his stepdad will be back.
mm,
So
mm,
perhaps he knew that he would find him and not me because I was gone all day at my dad's.
mm, mm.
'Cause I don't think he would have wanted me to find that, to
Right,
be quite
right.
honest, you know. So yes, mm, it was just a very strange time, Steve. And it was the first major, I suppose, bereavement that I've had.
Mm, mm,
I've been fortunate, I suppose. My mum and dad are still alive. They're 87, you know, brothers and sisters, all that kind of stuff. You know, a couple of aunts, uncles have died, but not people that really it would just hurt. And you're convinced it's just going to break your heart and you'll never survive again and you'll die, you know. And unfortunately, people who've experienced a bereavement are more susceptible perhaps to doing something similar.
mm,
Um, I don't know why, but actually, I could say my perspective of why. Actually, I can't say that's everyone's perspective of why. But when you lose someone that you really love, care for, can't be replaced anytime soon, don't you just want to be with them.
mm,
And
mm.
I don't mean I want to be with you, I want to die. I just want to be with you. I
Yeah,
want to be
yeah.
around you. You know, if you told me that you were down, you know, at the shops, I would go down there and see you. If you told me that you
Mm,
were next door, I'd pop next door and see you. I just want to see you. You know, so that huge feeling of wanting to be with somebody. So I think that's hmm, that would be my reason. But
yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't ever have defined it as I want to die. And you know, I work with people and I allow them to say how they're feeling. And
Mm,
there's a
mm,
question on one of my sheets which is about thoughts of self-harm, not wanting to be here, you know, like, yeah, because that's a very real feeling when it happens for human beings.
mm, mm.
And I want people to talk to me about it. I don't want to hide it.
Yeah, yeah,
My whole point is I'm meant to be helping you with this stuff, and you need to be able to share it and not feel bad about it and not hide it.
yeah.
So I do have people and they'll tell me that, and it's good.
Now,
It's
one of
good
the
that they
things that I
share
wanted
that.
to for us to discuss a little bit was, and we talked about this separately as well, as you said, that you know, how many people, when somebody takes their own life, you know, the amount of people who go, "Oh, I never saw that coming," or would never have believed that that person would do that. And when I've talked to you before about this, you don't feel like that, do you? It's almost like you've got a sense that you know, on reflection, that
Well, well, I mean, I think, you know, I've been reading a lot of philosophical stuff,
yeah,
Steve. Well,
as
probably
you do,
part of
don't
what
you?
as you
Yeah,
do on
yeah,
the weekend, but you
yeah.
know, and I do read a lot of philosophical stuff around this real thought in human beings that we are in control. But if we know that we've never been in control, we never will be in control, and can find a place for that as just a thought, then when things happen to you, you've got no major thought about it like, oh, it's not fair, that shouldn't have happened, this shouldn't have happened. It's like things happen. So for me, it's like Joy, of course you don't want that to happen to you. He's your only son, for God's sake. No one wants that to happen to their only child. But why shouldn't it happen to you?
Mm.
You know, and things happen, Joy. I'm like, yeah, things happen, but why me? And then it's, why not?
Mm.
So, you know, this cognitive behavioral therapy stuff the rabbit hole that I fell into is really, I think, been my savior, be quite honest, because I don't know what I would have held on to, literally, for the ride, the long ride. I don't know what I would have held on to keep me strong and stable and well, if it wasn't for the fact that actually, Joy, what you make it mean does matter.
Yes.
You know, and I make it mean that my son is now safe. He's now well. I will see him when it's my time. So I have my own faith and my own beliefs about what's going to happen, you know, when it's my time to move on. And that's it. But whilst I'm waiting to get there, I have to live, and I want to live, and I have a lot to give. Hence, I'm on here talking to Steve. It's like, hey, life doesn't stop. Life doesn't stop for me. My son wouldn't want life to stop for me either.
Yeah.
So you can work in whatever you want to, however you find your motivation again. I think you have to just make an effort to do it. And being around people who support you. I've got quite a big family, and they're just amazing people. They just like come around you like a warm duvet. You know, you think.
And is all of this part of his legacy, do you think? Do you see it like that?
Because I'm getting, when I get tongue tied, it means that there's something that I probably don't want to say. But anyway, ask the question again, Steve.
Do you think this is part of his legacy, or his legacy for you?
I think the answer is yes.
Right.
The answer is yes. It's a sad yes. Because I think, couldn't you have achieved that some other way? Please, did it have to be like that? You know, but it is part of his legacy. He's really sharpened my desire for living. And I know that people say that when you experience like bad things, it can either take you down or bring you up, but it sharpens my desire just to live life to the full, simply because he did that. And when we think about, and my family, when we all think about, he was only 23, it's like, it felt like he was like 43. I mean, he packed double the activities and stuff into his short life that I haven't even managed to pack into my long one. So you're looking at the philosophical stuff around, you know, what it helps you to define what is life, and then it helps you to put it in position with what is death. So what is life? That's another big philosophical thing, isn't it? Which another rabbit hole that you can fall into for a very long time. But you do want to come up.
That's a whole nother podcast, Joy.
It's a whole nother podcast. Exactly. What is life? But for me, I know that I have a lot of life left in me. That's not uncategorical. Boom. Doesn't mean I don't get sad. Doesn't mean I don't cry. Doesn't mean that I don't hurt sometimes when I think about it. But it doesn't stop me from living.
Well, do you know what? Back then, a few minutes ago, when you asked me to ask you that question again, I even remotely, I mean, as we record this, we are, 70 miles apart or something like that. And I felt an energy coming off you, even through the camera or through the microphone, you know, it did move me. And I would thank you for, you know, carrying on talking in the way you did, because I'm not sure for a moment there that I could have done.
Steve, thank you.
That was very moving.
Well, you know what, Steve, I'm really, as I said, happy to talk about my situation, how it was for me. And I'm also very careful about how I talk about this subject, because I don't want anyone that's listening who's feeling in a bad, sad, whatever place to think that this is the answer. Okay.
Well, I was going to
taking
actually
your
ask
own life is not the answer.
No, and I was going to ask you about that, because again, thinking about the people who are left, you know, like yourself and the family. Now, you know, you're lucky, if you want to call it that you have this skill set, this toolbox of stuff that you can call on. But what about if you're somebody who's not in that frame of mind? Let's say you are that person who is a bit of a, you know, sees that you're a bit of a victim in life, doesn't see that, you know, things are outside of our control, and then somebody close to you takes their own life as a surprise. You know, you weren't expecting it, is what I mean. So what, you know, what would you say to them? How can they deal with that? Because
Okay,
I know
okay,
people who have really kind of spiraled off, you know, when something like that's
okay,
happened.
okay. I just want to just double back a bit because, you know, like a good party political broadcast here about stress, anxiety, depression, and suicide. Like, you know, if you're in that space, seriously, if you're watching and you're in this space, please do not, please try and do something else. I would say hold on for a little bit longer, you know, hold on for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you know, because I think my son, his thoughts within the space of 5 or 10 minutes might have changed back to something else, and he may still be
Right.
here. You know, it's a possibility. And he left me a little note, which it wasn't long.
Mm,
It just said, "Sorry, Mum," and I thought, yeah, not
mm,
half,
mm,
you know, yeah. But it made me understand that he didn't want to hurt me.
mm-hmm.
That's what that as a mum, that's what I took from that message. Okay. But the person who's in pain, the person who's suffering, I don't downplay what's happening for them.
Mm,
It's not a
mm,
great place because if I have entertain a bad thought for more than 5 minutes, if I can, I have to pull away from it.
mm, mm,
If you're stuck in that space all day, every day, day in, I mean, I can see why it just shaped. It makes the world look very weird
mm,
and it makes you feel very uncomfortable. So recognizing hopefully that it's an illness, that you can find some way through this, that you've got to try and find the right people to talk to, and that you disappearing off this earth, although it feels like the exit door, it feels like I won't even say the easy way out. I think it's not easy, but the way out, it feels like an exit. And I just think sometimes there's a sense of, I just want whatever pain I'm in to stop. The people that are left behind, okay, I'm one of the people left behind. My mum, dad, sister, you know, brothers, all that. They're the ones that are left behind. I get that. I'm not downplaying our pain, but I don't think our pain should override the pain that the person who did what they did. Because that's all I'm doing is overriding my son's death with, oh, but he shouldn't have done it because I'm in such pain. That was such a terrible thing. How could he do it? And I'm like, Joy, you haven't got a clue how bad his pain was.
right. Yeah.
Perhaps we could multiply your pain that you're feeling now by 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
How does that feel, Joy? Pretty damned awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, yes, I am in pain. I get it. I'm in pain because I miss somebody.
Mm,
I'm in pain because of what that person means to me. Okay. So you're asking, without having the tools in the toolbox like I do, what should someone kind of do?
mm-hmm.
And this thing about, yes, of course you're going to miss someone. Of course it's going to like be painful. But even then, different types of pain.
Mm,
I
mm,
don't classify myself as being in pain. I hurt. I get upset. It gets me sometimes, and I have to like, you know, oops, mainly at night, you know. Yeah, but I'm not suffering. Now it gets philosophical, really, because
yeah. Yeah.
you know you're only suffering because of what you're thinking.
Mm,
So I do fill my thoughts with really positive things about my son. You
yeah.
know, I do think about him. I'm allowed to think about him. I've got no part of me that thinks I'm going to forget about him. You know, people think I might forget about that person. It's their guilt. I might forget about them. I went a whole day and I didn't think about. I went a whole week and I didn't think about them. Yeah, great. Do you know what? They'd be happy for you.
Mm.
They'd be happy that you're happy and you're getting back to a good place.
Yeah.
Okay, because I
Yeah.
don't think their decision was made to make your life left on earth hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that would be part of, if I really thought that my son's doing this so that I can be on this earth for whatever number of years I've got left so it can be hellish.
Mm,
I'm like, I don't think he would have thought that. He would not have
yeah.
wanted that for me. I think we have to really put what happened to that person in context. It mattered a lot to them and what was going on them. And we are the fallout, perhaps of that person's sadness or pain, or how we cope with it, what we make it mean, allowing ourselves to grieve, talking to people who want to listen to you about it. After a certain amount of time does become a healer. As much as we hate that phrase, time is a healer. You do things in your own time. So for me, it was possibly, you know, being able to be in my son's room, being able to change the way the room looked, being able to get rid of some of his clothes. You know, that they were all like, and I'm getting goosebumps thinking about that, big
Yeah, no, I did
stages,
as well when you said that.
stages,
Yeah.
stages, because the getting rid of someone's personal possessions is just one of the hardest things,
Yeah.
you know. But I said, I can't keep everything, you know, but I will keep some things.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you actually, as a way of kind of wrapping this up a little bit, it's one of the things that we've become very aware of is that we're being told the sort of suicide rates are increasing. You know, the pandemic's not helping. I think that the second pandemic is going to be a mental health related one. And even in the last week or so, I've heard stories of massive amounts of mental health issues going on in the automotive industry, which obviously what we're aiming at. It's ironic, of course, that Riaz, your son, was in the automotive industry, and I must
Ironically,
admit,
yes.
I hadn't realised that. I don't know how that didn't come up in conversation before, but I didn't realise that. And I've heard a story as well that there's a dealership I was talking to last week who have got a technician who attempted a suicide, didn't succeed. But of course, they're now all thinking, well, how do we as managers ease that or get that person to come back in and overcome the embarrassment, the stigma, and their words to me were they know they're going to have, that person's going to have conversations that will range from people saying, how are you okay, is there anything you need, to other people who won't say anything because they're too embarrassed, right the way up to the other end of the scale where there'll be people who, slap him on the back and say, sort yourself out, mate. So how would you as a therapist suggest that workplace, help that person come back into an environment?
So I think it's important that the environment that you were in is supportive. There might also be a feeling that you're so embarrassed you don't want to go back anyway. You know, but my son did go back. I did wonder how people would treat him, but I realized that the guys that he worked with were just nice guys, and they did support him. And, you know, for me, he didn't look the brightest anymore. Unfortunately, he lost that kind of life, I felt, in his eyes, but he still went back to work. He has good work ethics. He said, Mum, I have to get back to work. I've got to pay for this loan on this car that he's got. So, you know, so he knew he had to work, and that's his just driven, you know. But I think trying to treat them as normal. I can't think of anything else to say at the moment, Steve, apart from try to treat them as normal. And if they want to talk about it, that's fine. If you're close to somebody, of course you can bring it up, you know, because it's not the elephant in the room. You can't pretend that it didn't happen. It did happen, you know. But I think it depends on how close you are to someone. And if you are someone who really doesn't know what to say, you know, just try and treat them as normal.
Yeah.
That would be lovely. Because I think the worst thing you could do to somebody is treat them differently.
Yeah.
You know, so that's at the best, do that, you know. And I think people who really want to put the boot in, or just, you know, perhaps have a bit of a laugh. I know men have a different way of dealing with it, you know, or better luck next time, or, you know, and sometimes people can be very cruel as well. You know, he didn't try hard enough, or, you know, so you get all kinds of sick jokes that will happen around anything. I would just say to them, keep your trap shut.
Right. Yes.
What can I say, Steve? Apart in the nicest, politest way.
Can't say anything
on
kind,
air.
don't say anything at all.
Yeah. Yes, but I think you read between the lines what I would say to them.
Yeah.
You know, basically, you disgusting human being, get out of this room right now. You know, because like they say, by the grace of God, that could be you or I. This is that phrase, isn't it? So don't look at someone and judge them and mock them, when actually, given a slight tweak in the universe, slightly different situations, that could be you.
Yeah, indeed.
So
indeed.
that comes down to your morals and your beliefs and your values, how you choose to live your life and how you choose to treat people.
Yeah.
So you treat people in a way as you would want to be treated yourself. So
you'd make
what can
things
I say?
mean. What you make it mean, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's back to
exactly.
That's the theme for today.
It's not what happens to you, it's what you make it mean.
Yeah, love that.
And if you can begin to wrap your head around that, it gives you an alternative. My name's Joy, for God's sake. Things shouldn't happen to someone with a name Joy, should they, Steve? It just doesn't seem right.
No,
does it?
I understand.
So it's ironic, but also, why not?
Yeah.
So my why not really gets me back to a place of like some kind of calm.
Very briefly, how could people get hold of you?
Yes, the best way to get hold of me. Okay, I'm on LinkedIn, so
Hmm.
you'll probably find me under Karen Joy Langley because I have
Hmm.
two names. Otherwise, my website is stopfeelingstressedout.com. So does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, that's
Help you to
perfect. Yeah,
say, help you to stop feeling stressed out. So
yeah,
stopfeelingstressedout.com. And if you really can't find it, I'm sure you can get back to Steve, but that's
yeah.
the best way
Come
to
back
get
through
through to
us.
me. Yeah.
Perfect.
Or just type my name into, I suppose, any search engine. It will find my therapy site as well, I'm sure, which is Catch a Thought. But
Hmm.
for the purposes of what I'm doing right now, it's this focusing on stress and stress management. So
Yeah,
stopfeelingstressedout.com.
brilliant. Joy, thank you so much. I know that really has sort of, you know, been, not the easiest of conversations for you to have. So I really do thank you for sharing as much as you have with us, and hope that, you know, being on the podcast today has helped a little bit as well, or, you've enjoyed it.
Talking about my son is an absolute pleasure,
Oh, you're a star.
Steve.
You're a star. Well, let's dedicate this podcast to him.
Riaz,
And
Jay, this one's for you.
yeah, absolutely, 100% with you
Thank
on that.
you.
So,
Thank you,
Joy,
Steve.
thank you so much. I look forward to our next chat as always. And
Absolutely.
yeah, we'll probably come back and do a part 2 in a few months' time.
Why not? Why not? Anything. You know, I love to talk.
Yeah, great, perfect. Thank you so much
All right,
again.
Steve. You have
And
a lovely afternoon or morning, wherever you might. Well, you're in
whatever
England.
time of day it is, who
Yeah,
cares?
whatever time you're
5
listening, you
o'clock
guys out
somewhere.
there, have a great day wherever you might be in the world. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, spot on.
Okay.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much
Steve.
again.
Speak
Take
to you
care.
soon.
Cheerio.
Okay. Bye bye.